I found a lipstick in his car. I said nothing, but invited the woman to my birthday dinner. The first time Olivia noticed something was off was on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. She had picked up Nathan's car from the repair shop, something she often did when his meetings ran late. As she settled into the driver's seat, the sharp scent of vanilla perfume hit her, one she didn't recognize. It wasn't hers. She leaned forward to adjust the seat and noticed a sleek, crimson lipstick tube nestled in the carpet under the passenger seat. It was high-end, the kind of brand she had admired but never splurged on. Olivia picked it up slowly, as if it might burn her fingers. She didn't confront Nathan. Instead, she placed the lipstick in her purse and drove home in silence, her mind working through a storm of thoughts. There was no note, no name, just silence and a heavy, rising suspicion. When she got home, Nathan was already there, shirt collar unbuttoned, pouring himself a drink. He looked up with his usual tired smile, kissed her cheek, and asked how her day had been. Olivia smiled back, her voice smooth as silk, pretending everything was fine. But her mind wasn't quiet. For the first time in their 12 years of marriage, she was certain something was being hidden from her. She had always believed in trusting until proven wrong. But now, with that lipstick in her bag like a secret witness, she felt the air between them shift, an invisible wall rising, brick by brick. That night, as she lay beside him in bed, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, wondering when exactly her marriage had started to become someone else's story. 3 weeks later, Olivia's wedding anniversary came and went without so much as a card. Nathan, who once lit candles in their backyard and baked her a chocolate souffle just to celebrate their 5th, forgot entirely. No dinner, no flowers, not even a text message. When she reminded him gently that evening, he blinked and said, "Oh no. That was today?" His tone was casual, like he had forgotten to pick up milk on the way home. She nodded, saying it was fine, that he must have had a long day. But as he turned on the TV and settled into the couch, she walked into the kitchen, placed both hands on the counter, and tried to stop the sting in her chest from turning into tears. Later that night, when he was asleep on the couch, snoring softly, she took out the old photo album from the hall closet. Page after page, memories of trips, inside jokes, shared meals, and slow dances smiled back at her. But none of those images looked like the man on the couch now. He had grown distant. Not cruel, not cold, but simply elsewhere. As if she were a familiar book he had already read and placed on the shelf. Olivia sat alone with a cup of tea, not to mourn the forgotten anniversary, but to acknowledge that something more precious had been forgotten, their connection, their intimacy. That night, for the first time in years, she didn't kiss him goodnight. Over the next few days, Olivia began noticing subtle things that no longer added up. A second wine glass in the dishwasher when she hadn't had a drink. A strand of blonde hair curled around the edge of the bathroom sink, too light to be hers. Receipts for lunches and coffee from places across town, where Nathan never claimed to be. She didn't confront him. Instead, she observed. She began memorizing the times he claimed to be held up at work and tracking them against the charge notifications on their joint credit card. Her suspicions grew not from sudden evidence, but from the consistent erosion of truth. It wasn't one lie. It was dozens of small omissions, sewn into the fabric of their everyday life. One night, when he stepped into the shower, she glanced at his phone left carelessly on the bed. It was locked, as always, but he hadn't changed the passcode in years. Their wedding date. She hesitated, this wasn't who she wanted to be. But trust had left the room long ago. She unlocked the phone. No text messages. But in his email was a dinner reservation for 2 at a French bistro they'd once said they'd go to someday. He had made the reservation for the following Thursday. The note, window seat. She loves the view. Olivia stared at the screen, hand trembling, and realized that someday had finally arrived, but for someone else. From that moment on, Olivia stopped reacting and began planning. She didn't throw a scene. She didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She smiled more than usual, kissed him goodbye in the mornings, and asked about his day at dinner. But behind her eyes, something sharper than grief had awakened. She began keeping notes, timelines, names, locations. When he said he was at a client dinner, she called the office and learned the meeting had been canceled. When he claimed to be working late, she drove by his office and saw the lights out. She didn't confront him yet. She wanted to catch the full picture, to let the deception run its course. During those quiet evenings, Olivia sat in their guest room, now transformed into her private space, and wrote in a journal she had kept buried for years. It had once held reflections on love and poetry. Now it bore witness to betrayal. On its pages, she mapped out her thoughts, her heartbreak, and most importantly, her clarity. She wouldn't fall apart. She would not beg. If Nathan had turned their marriage into a lie, then she would use that lie as the stage for a truth too powerful to ignore. She didn't know exactly how yet, but one thing was clear: she would choose the moment. And it would not be on his terms. The final confirmation came at a charity event, where Olivia had tagged along at the last minute, dressed in a navy gown Nathan once called too serious. She wore it proudly. As they mingled with acquaintances and colleagues, she noticed a woman across the room who caught Nathan's gaze just a second too long. The woman was beautiful, confident, and smiling at Nathan in a way that only those with secrets do. Olivia approached the couple slowly. Nathan's eyes flickered, but his voice remained steady as he said, "Olivia, this is Zoe. She's a consultant from the agency." Zoe extended her hand with a gleam of amusement in her eyes, as if challenging Olivia to see what wasn't being said. Olivia shook her hand and offered a genuine smile. "Lovely to meet you, Zoe. I've heard your name before." Zoe hesitated for just a breath, eyes narrowing slightly. Nathan coughed and shifted uncomfortably. That was all Olivia needed. She didn't need to catch them in the act. She had just witnessed the unspoken language of guilt. She excused herself to get a drink, her heart pounding, not from heartbreak, but from the thrill of certainty. Now, she knew her plan would work. Now, the pieces could move into place. And it would all start with an invitation, one Zoe would never see coming. Olivia had always preferred quiet birthdays, dinner at home, a walk under the stars, maybe a slice of lemon cake from her favorite bakery. But this year, she decided to plan something different. A formal dinner at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. She reserved a long table for 12, curated a private menu, and requested candles and soft piano music. Everything had to be perfect. She told Nathan it would be intimate, just close friends and family. He looked surprised but pleased. "I didn't think you wanted to celebrate big this year," he said. Olivia smiled and replied, "This year, I feel like doing something memorable." What she didn't tell him was that Zoe would be there too. She carefully arranged the guest list, placing Zoe's name third from the top, tucked between mutual friends. To anyone else, it looked perfectly ordinary. But to Olivia, it was a calculated step. She sent the invitations through email and text, adding a personal touch to Zoe's, "I'd love to see you at my birthday. I always hear such lovely things about you from Nathan." She hit send with a calm so steady it surprised her. She was no longer wondering whether Nathan would betray her again. She was preparing to let him do it, right in front of everyone. The list of guests for the dinner was intentionally curated: friends from her yoga class, an old colleague from the publishing house, her sister, Nathan's cousin, and 2 couples from their neighborhood. But the most important seat would be across from Zoe. Olivia made sure of it. She had even called the restaurant directly to oversee the seating arrangement. "I'd like a long rectangular table. I want my husband across from me, and his guest, Zoe, next to him. They're close friends, you see." Her voice was steady, even cheerful, as she spoke to the maitre d'. In the week leading up to the dinner, Olivia bought herself a new dress, a soft champagne silk that hugged her figure without shouting for attention. She booked a hair appointment and chose a scent Nathan used to adore but hadn't noticed in years. She wasn't trying to compete with Zoe. This wasn't about beauty. It was about composure, presence, and power. She didn't want Zoe to feel embarrassed. Not yet. She wanted her to feel like she belonged in the room, until the moment she didn't. 2 days before the dinner, Olivia spotted Zoe again, this time alone at a boutique downtown, trying on jewelry. She hesitated before walking in, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Zoe noticed her and smiled, surprised but unbothered. "Olivia, right?" "Small world," she said, adjusting a gold necklace. "Yes, it is," Olivia replied, her voice smooth. "I was just about to message you. I wanted to make sure you got my birthday dinner invite. It's this Friday." Zoe tilted her head, amused. "Of course, I did. I wasn't sure if you really meant to include me." Olivia kept her eyes on Zoe's reflection in the mirror. "Of course, I did. You've become a part of our lives. I'd be honored." Zoe laughed lightly and said she would try to make it. "You and Nathan must be the most evolved couple I know," she added with a sly smirk. Olivia didn't flinch. "We believe in transparency," she said simply. They exchanged a few more words, then parted with polite smiles. As Olivia walked out of the store, her heart pounded, not from fear, but from how perfectly the pieces were aligning. Zoe thought she was in control. Nathan thought he was too clever to be caught. But Olivia had stopped being the wife who asked questions. Now, she was the woman who waited for her moment. The morning before the dinner, Olivia found another blonde hair on Nathan's pillow. This time, it was unmistakably fresh. It gleamed in the sunlight, curved and delicate like a final breadcrumb leading to the truth. She held it between her fingers for a moment, then calmly placed it in a tissue and tucked it in her drawer. She had stopped feeling anger. What remained was a sharp clarity, a sense of quiet preparation. This wasn't just about exposing a betrayal. It was about ending something without apology or weakness. The Olivia who once cried into her pillow was gone. Nathan emerged from the bathroom, towel slung around his shoulders, smiling as if the world hadn't shifted beneath their feet. "I might be a little late tomorrow night," he said casually. "Got a meeting that may run long." Olivia raised her eyes from her book and said softly, "No worries. Just try to make it on time. Everyone's looking forward to seeing you." He kissed her forehead absent-mindedly and left the room. As the door closed behind him, Olivia exhaled slowly. The script was written. The curtain would rise tomorrow night. And all that remained was for the actors to play their roles. That afternoon, Olivia walked through their bedroom and opened Nathan's closet. She took in the sight of his pressed shirts, his carefully polished shoes, and the cologne he always kept on the top shelf. Except one bottle had moved. She uncapped it and sniffed, then laughed quietly. It was the same fragrance she had smelled on the lipstick from the car. She remembered the name from the boutique where she met Zoe. Expensive. Bold. Not her style. But apparently, now it was his. She put the bottle back exactly where she found it and stepped away. Later, she sat on the edge of the bed and opened her journal. She wrote only one sentence: "Tomorrow, he will see me." Not the version of her that made coffee at 7 a.m. and folded his laundry. Not the one who smiled through empty conversations. But the version that had watched him unravel and stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of strategy. As the sun set behind the curtains, Olivia felt no dread. No panic. Only calm. The kind that came before a storm she was about to command. That evening, as Nathan showered, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, pretending to scroll through her phone. His phone lit up on the nightstand, buzzing softly with an incoming call. The screen flashed a name she had already guessed would appear, Z. Her heart didn't race. Instead, she observed the moment like a scientist watching a reaction in a controlled lab. When the call went to voicemail, a message popped up. It was brief, but the words said everything. Still thinking about last night. Same place next week? Olivia locked the screen and set the phone down, her face unreadable. She didn't need to open the message thread. She had seen enough. The weight of the affair was no longer just a suspicion, it was fully confirmed, carved into the patterns of Nathan's routines and the careless ease with which he lied. As the water from the shower continued to run, she whispered to herself, one more day. Nathan had unknowingly handed her the final proof, the final insult. And soon, in front of everyone, he would be forced to sit in the truth he tried so hard to hide. On the morning of her birthday, Olivia woke early. She stared at the ceiling, the quiet stillness of dawn pressing in around her. Beside her, Nathan slept soundly, completely unaware that the story he thought he was writing had already reached its final chapter. For a brief moment, she considered canceling everything, erasing the dinner, deleting the guest list, walking away without the scene. But then she remembered the dismissiveness in his voice, the subtle gaslighting, the way he left crumbs of deceit and expected her to clean up without protest. No. There would be no quiet exit. Downstairs, as she poured herself a cup of coffee, she looked at the kitchen, the same place where they'd once danced barefoot to old jazz records while pasta boiled on the stove. That life had vanished long ago, replaced by appointments, deadlines, and excuses. But tonight, this house wouldn't hold her pain anymore. It would hold her power. She took a long sip, looked out the window, and smiled faintly. The Olivia who had accepted crumbs was gone. And the one who remained was ready to serve the main course. Olivia arrived at the restaurant an hour before the scheduled dinner. She was greeted by the maitre d' with a warmth reserved for VIP guests. She walked through the dimly lit space, elegant and understated, until she reached the long table arranged exactly as requested. She studied the place cards, Nathan across from her, Zoe seated at his left. She had even arranged for a small floral centerpiece that subtly divided the table, as if foreshadowing the split that was about to occur. She handed the staff a sealed envelope and gave precise instructions. After dessert is served, I'd like you to bring this to me quietly. No announcement, just a handoff. Inside the envelope were printed screenshots, carefully selected messages between Nathan and Zoe, each one time-stamped and highlighted. The maitre d' nodded, sensing the gravity beneath her smile. Olivia sat for a moment at the head of the table, alone in the silence before the storm. Her fingers brushed the linen napkin as she imagined their faces. It was almost time. Earlier that afternoon, Olivia had written something else, a personal letter addressed to Zoe. She hadn't planned to, but the words came freely, like a release of pressure from a valve held too tight. In the letter, she didn't scream or accuse. Instead, she wrote with clarity and poise. Zoe, I don't know what Nathan told you. Maybe he said we were separated. Maybe he said I was cold, distant, distracted. But we were still married. Fully. You walked into something that wasn't yours. She folded the letter carefully, placed it in a matching cream envelope, and tucked it into her purse. She wasn't sure if she would give it to Zoe at all. Maybe after the dinner. Maybe not. But it existed, and somehow, that made her feel less like a victim and more like a narrator of her own life. Writing it had reminded her that grace doesn't mean silence. Sometimes, grace is the steady hand that offers truth with dignity, even when the recipient doesn't deserve it. Just before the guests arrived, Olivia reviewed the wine list with the sommelier. She selected a vintage red for the main course, something bold, structured, with a sharp finish. It should linger, she said with a slight smile. Nathan always believed wine said something about the mood of an evening. He would often choose soft blends, easy on the palate, predictable. But tonight was not about comfort. It was about memory. And this wine would not be easily forgotten. As she stood near the entrance, greeting guests one by one with hugs and smiles, she felt a curious peace settle over her. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't falter. And when Nathan arrived, dressed in his navy suit and pretending nothing was unusual, she welcomed him with a kiss on the cheek and a warm "happy you made it." He smiled, clueless, his eyes scanning the room. Then he saw Zoe walking in, and for a second, Olivia saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes. Just a flash. But it was enough to tell her everything was about to unfold exactly as planned. As Nathan greeted the other guests, Olivia watched him with the precision of a chess player anticipating every move. He laughed, made small talk, and even kissed her on the cheek again before taking his seat. But she noticed it, the slight tremble in his hand as he reached for his water glass, the way he avoided eye contact with Zoe when they sat. Something in his confidence had cracked. He hadn't expected Zoe to come. And more importantly, he hadn't expected Olivia to know they knew each other. Zoe, to her credit, maintained her composure well. She greeted Olivia with exaggerated warmth, complimented her dress, and even asked for the name of the designer. Olivia returned the energy with equal polish. "It's custom," she said with a smile. "Nathan helped me pick the color." Nathan cleared his throat and busied himself with the wine menu, his ears visibly flushing. Across the table, Olivia's sister exchanged a glance with her, subtle and knowing. Everything was moving perfectly. Olivia's dress shimmered softly under the restaurant's low lighting, its champagne hue catching every flicker of candlelight. It had been a deliberate choice, elegant but commanding, with a neckline just daring enough to remind Nathan of who she was before his eyes started wandering. Throughout dinner, she noticed Nathan glancing at her more than once. He tried to make conversation, tried to re-establish the rhythm they used to have, but Olivia gave him little to hold on to. When the main course arrived, Zoe leaned in slightly toward Nathan and whispered something. Olivia couldn't hear the words, but she watched his reaction. He froze for a second, then forced a chuckle that came out wrong. She wasn't sure if Zoe had figured it out yet, if she was starting to sense the trap. But even if she hadn't, the unease was growing. It dripped from Nathan like condensation on a glass, slow, cold, inevitable. The wine was poured, the dishes cleared, and the soft notes of a pianist played from across the room. Olivia glanced around the table. Laughter echoed in short bursts, forks clinked, and smiles stretched across lips that had no idea what was coming. She took a small breath, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist, the one Nathan gave her on their 5th anniversary. He hadn't noticed she was wearing it tonight. The maitre d' approached quietly and placed a small envelope at Olivia's side, just as she had requested. He gave a polite nod and stepped away. She placed her hand on the envelope gently, like it was fragile, then stood. "Before dessert is served," she said, raising her glass, "I'd like to say a few words." The table quieted. Nathan looked up, smiling nervously. Zoe reached for her napkin. The air grew still, heavy with anticipation neither of them could name. But Olivia could. Olivia raised her glass slightly higher. "Tonight, I want to thank everyone who came. Birthdays are funny things, we mark them, but rarely do we use them to take stock of what we've learned." She paused. "This year, I've learned the value of presence. Of truth. Of seeing people as they are, not just as we wish they were." Nathan's expression stiffened. A faint rustle passed through the room, like wind shifting through tall grass. She turned slightly toward him. "Nathan, thank you for showing me who you are. I didn't want to see it at first. But now, I do." She set down her glass, then opened the envelope. Inside were the printed messages, conversations, photos, timestamps, and a simple note at the bottom, "You were never careful." She passed the papers to Zoe, who blinked in confusion. "You should know what he told me versus what he told you," Olivia said calmly. "I figured tonight was a good night for honesty." Zoe took the papers with trembling hands. As she read, the color drained from her face. Nathan sat frozen, his jaw slightly parted, unsure whether to grab the papers, deny, or simply disappear into the floor. The silence at the table was deafening. Olivia didn't move. She watched Zoe's eyes widen, her lips tighten. Then, a soft exhale escaped her, almost like a sigh of recognition. "He told me you were separated," Zoe said quietly, without looking up. Olivia nodded. "I know." For a long moment, no one said anything. Then Zoe stood slowly, her chair scraping gently against the hardwood. She placed the envelope back on the table, her hands now steady. "I didn't know," she said, her voice brittle but controlled. "But I do now." She looked at Nathan, who couldn't meet her eyes. Then she looked at Olivia. "Thank you for letting me find out like this." And just like that, Zoe walked away, leaving behind only silence and a man whose mask had finally shattered. For a moment, the table was suspended in stunned silence. No one dared move. Nathan shifted in his seat, pale and blinking, his mouth opening to speak, then closing again. Across from him, Olivia remained poised, her back straight, her hands folded. Just as the weight of the silence became unbearable, Olivia's old friend Damien, seated at the far end, cleared his throat. "So that's what's been going on," he muttered, loud enough for the whole table. "All those excuses, the late nights. We wondered." The other guests began to murmur, their discomfort palpable. Nathan tried to recover, his voice shaky. "Olivia, can we please not do this here?" he said, forcing a nervous laugh. But Damien leaned forward, his voice cool. "I think here is exactly where it should happen. You paraded your lies around like nothing, brought her into our lives, and made us complicit without even knowing it." Nathan stared at him, speechless. Olivia didn't need to say another word, her silence was enough. The room had already turned. Nathan's eyes darted across the table, looking for refuge, but none came. Every face he met carried disbelief or quiet contempt. The image he had carefully curated, a loyal husband, a man too busy with work to be present, was unraveling right there between the wine glasses and candlelight. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Zoe and I," but he stopped himself, realizing he could no longer mold the narrative to his liking. Even those who had known Nathan for years sat back, arms crossed, avoiding his gaze. His cousin Melissa, usually the one to jump to his defense, looked away, lips pursed in quiet disappointment. Nathan looked to Olivia again, as if pleading for her to end the scene, to give him a lifeline. But she remained composed, her eyes distant. She had done what she came to do. Now, he was left alone in the wreckage of his own design. Later, as most of the guests had awkwardly slipped away or stood talking in hushed tones, Zoe returned. Her makeup was smudged but her posture firm. She approached Olivia slowly, holding the envelope with the printed messages. "I came back because I needed to say something," she said. Olivia turned to face her, giving a small nod, inviting her to continue. Zoe looked down at the papers. "I didn't know he was lying to me too. He said you were already divorced. He made it sound like you were just dragging it out." Olivia said nothing, her eyes tired but kind. Zoe continued, "I didn't want to be the other woman. I would never have knowingly done this. And I'm sorry, for believing him, for being part of it, even without knowing." Olivia reached out, gently taking the envelope back. "You didn't owe me anything," she said. "But thank you for apologizing. That means something." Zoe nodded, her eyes wet, and then quietly walked away again, this time with no illusions left. Before leaving the restaurant, Olivia pulled the second envelope from her purse, the one with the letter she had written for Zoe. She caught up to her just outside the doors, the cold night air curling around them like smoke. "One more thing," she said, handing Zoe the letter. "It's for later. When things settle." Zoe hesitated, then took the envelope, her fingers brushing Olivia's just for a moment. "I'll read it," she whispered. "And I hope one day, you let someone love you better than he did." Olivia watched as Zoe disappeared into the waiting cab, holding the letter close to her chest. For a brief second, a strange sense of peace wrapped itself around Olivia, not because she had won anything, but because she had faced everything. There had been no shouting, no revenge in the traditional sense. Only truth, delivered plainly, painfully, but with dignity. It was the closure neither of them had expected, but both had needed. Back inside, Nathan remained at the now empty table, staring at his half-finished glass of wine. The candles were still burning, casting shadows over his slouched figure. Olivia approached, her heels clicking softly against the wood. He looked up, and for the first time in a long while, she saw real fear in his eyes. "I didn't want to lose you," he said weakly, as if the words could rewind everything. She tilted her head, her tone calm. "You lost me a long time ago. You just didn't notice." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Please," he said. "We can fix this. I can explain everything." Olivia shook her head. "There's nothing left to explain. You didn't just betray me, you erased me from your future while pretending to include me in your present." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Nathan alone, surrounded by empty chairs, cold plates, and all the evidence of what he had broken. The next morning, Olivia woke early, her eyes clear and her heart strangely light. She had slept better than she had in months. There was no hesitation in her steps as she walked into the bedroom, gathered her things, and placed a small overnight bag on the bed. Nathan stirred but didn't speak. She didn't offer explanations or anger. Instead, she left a note on the nightstand: "I'm not walking away because I'm broken. I'm walking away because I'm finally whole." Then, without looking back, she closed the front door behind her. She didn't cry as she loaded the last of her boxes into the backseat of her sister's car. She didn't linger in the driveway, nor glance at the windows of the house that had once been a home. That chapter had closed. Olivia had signed a short-term lease on a modest apartment downtown. It wasn't lavish or spacious, but it was hers. It was quiet, sunlit, and full of possibilities. As she unpacked, she didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it breathe, let it stretch, and finally, she let it heal. 3 weeks later, Olivia received an unexpected email. A colleague from a past consulting project had heard about her composed confrontation, as he called it, and wanted to speak with her about a new opportunity. Intrigued, she agreed. Over coffee, he explained his vision: an organization that offered leadership coaching for women navigating transitions, divorce, career pivots, personal loss. He asked if Olivia would consider being one of the speakers. She blinked. "Me?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Because you didn't fall apart. You rose." Olivia accepted the offer, not for validation, but because it felt aligned. Her pain hadn't been wasted, it had become something purposeful. She began crafting talks, not about revenge, but about resilience. She told stories about finding truth, holding boundaries, and walking away with grace. Her audiences listened, eyes wide and silent. And when they stood to applaud her words, Olivia didn't see herself as a survivor. She saw herself as a guide, leading others through the dark with a steady light. 1 year later, on her next birthday, Olivia sat at a different restaurant, surrounded by a new circle of friends. They toasted her with laughter and warmth, and the air was light, unburdened. No long table. No secrets. Just honesty and affection. The waiter brought out a small cake with candles, and as they sang, Olivia looked around the room, really looked. These people hadn't known her during the unraveling, but they knew her now. And they accepted her fully, not as someone recovering, but someone renewed. After dinner, she walked home alone, the cool breeze wrapping around her shoulders. She didn't feel lonely. She felt whole. She paused outside her apartment building, staring up at the sky. For the first time in years, she didn't wish to undo anything. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the pain, they had shaped her, not broken her. And as she blew out a single candle later that night in her kitchen, she whispered to herself, "This time, I'm making my own wishes." Months later, Olivia met someone new, not at a party or through a dating app, but during a speaking event at a local community center. His name was Daniel, and he wasn't loud, flashy, or full of charm. He was thoughtful. He listened. He didn't try to impress her, he just showed up, consistently. They had coffee, then lunch, then long walks where conversation came easily and silence felt safe. Olivia didn't rush. She let time show her what trust looked like this time around. She told him about her past, not as a warning, but as a truth. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "You deserved better. I'm glad you didn't settle." With Daniel, there was no need to hide. There were no games, no unspoken rules. Just mutual respect, curiosity, and kindness. For the first time, love didn't feel like a gamble, it felt like a quiet certainty. And Olivia, after everything, finally allowed herself to believe she was worthy of that. One afternoon, while sipping tea at her favorite bookstore cafe, Olivia noticed a woman seated alone by the window. She looked tired, worried, like someone holding back tears. Olivia recognized that look, it had once belonged to her. She debated whether to say something, then stood and walked over. "Excuse me," she said gently. "You look like someone who needs to hear that you're not alone." The woman smiled weakly. Olivia sat down and began to listen. Later, walking home, Olivia thought about how far she had come. She had lost a marriage, but found herself. She had faced humiliation, but emerged with dignity. And she had been broken open, only to discover that her true strength had never left. It had only been waiting for her to claim it. Some endings are disguised as devastation, she thought. But sometimes, the greatest gift comes wrapped in silence, in a goodbye, in the courage to start again. And she had chosen to begin, fully and fiercely, on her own terms.